Hello, dear friends, how are you? I hope you're holding up, and I hope you're facing the reality of the virus with courage and faith. And the main thing is to have patience and perseverance. I would like to continue our conversation where we left off in the winter of 1942. This was a very bitter, very cold winter. During that winter, we were joined in the partisans by my aunt, Elisa, and her daughter, Amira, the younger daughter. The older daughter, Bela, was a beautiful, beautiful young woman. She died during the winter. And as you may recall from my previous statements, I lived with them together in the farm. And things turned to be very bad and dangerous for them to remain on the farm because the neighbors were beginning to talk about the fact that the Jewish family was on the farm, and the farmer was fearing for his life and the life of his family. So my aunt and daughter Mir had to leave. Bailey also was still alive, I think, when they left, and she died during that winter. I haven't seen her as of the time when I was on the farm and returned back to the ghetto, and they remained on the farm. It was a very sad situation. I was very fond of my cousins, and Bailey especially was a very special person. And it only added on to the loss of the family. The winter was hard for everybody. Food was scarce. Clothing was skimpy. We had nothing to wear. And the blankets that we we had to share with one another. And so we kept on drudging through from one day to another and continue finding some shelter in the forest among the trees. At that time, I recall, among the partisans, there were a lot of young people, virtually teenagers, and at that time, the Russians dropped a parachutist into the partisans, among the partisans in the forest, with the purpose of organizing a special group, a commando group, to do all kinds of sabotage or military activities. And they accomplished a great deal. I remember these young boys I mentioned to you. You may recall 2 or 3 of them died in the bunker, in the hole which we had in the winter there in the forest. And we had to move out and leave them there. So teenagers of that age, some were between the age of 15, 16 to 20, were gathered up by this captain of the Russian army, and they organized from lost souls, virtually lost souls of young people who couldn't orientate themselves, who had nowhere to go and no one with whom to be. They were alone, and they were actually waiting to die, or to be killed, or to die from frost, or die from hunger. He came down, he organized them all, and among them were women as well as men, and they would disappear. After a while, they would come back and join up with us for a day or two and go away again on missions. And sooner or later, we began to receive reports in the partisans. Believe it or not, we received information from the farmers, and the farmers received it from one another. Some people also listened news on the radio. But from this group, that was a matter of word of mouth, how they would engage in various clandestine activities in order to sabotage the military effort of the Germans in their march to occupy and destroy and devastate Europe, in this particular case, what is today Belarus, White Russia. This was one of the more or less inspiring moments in the forest. The fact that this group of young people, around 15, 20 of them, were engaged in this kind of activities, a really heroic acts of endangering their own lives for the sake of achieving certain goals, was a very inspiring thing for all of us. I, as a child, at least, reacted with admiration and awe. In addition to this, the partisans began to forage for food. Oddly enough, I don't recall ever any instance where we relied upon the wild beasts in the forest, like deer or other animals that we would hunt for the purpose of eating. Basically, we hardly encountered this kind of animals in the forest. And in the areas where we lived, there were no natural vegetation. By this I mean berries that could be eaten, or trees with nuts and stuff like this. We were basically in a pure forest of jungle, in which we could only find shelter. And we utilized it to the best of our ability. We'll use the leaves or the branches, the thin branches of the trees, to chop them down and use it like a bed or a mattress to make the ground a little warmer and softer to lie on. And we also use the trees and the branches to build the huts and cabins. But that was always temporary. In this sense, we lived from day to day, and every once in a while, when a partisan group would come into our little camp of families, of 3 or 4, maybe 5 families. What is a family? A family means maybe 2 or 3 people together, maybe a husband and wife, sometimes single people. And we'd spend some of the evenings at a fire, and while our time away, in fear, no one should notice us. So in the winter time, we had to make a fire at night, and we would make a circle around the fire to block the fire from the distance. People shouldn't see the fires. That was one thing. If you get close to the fire, you get burned. If you move a little bit further from the fire, you were cold. Under any conditions, no matter how you sat, if you sat with the front to the fire, your front was warm, the back was cold. It was a situation where you couldn't win, and were hungry too. The adults would tell us children to go into the cabin, the cabin which was built out of blankets, to go to sleep, and they would just sit longer and discuss things of what to do the next day, make plans to go for some missions in order to obtain some food from the farmers, some clothing from the farmers, or to go out on specific missions. The younger men, who were now organized in military units, would go away to carry out specific missions around the area. Those missions consisted of destroying means of transportation, railroads, mining roads, highways, bridges. That was one thing. There were also times when the partisans began to plan actions against various garrisons, which the Germans put in special in special villages, especially those which had the crossings of the highways and were in a controlling position, so that from that location where they were strategically placed to control all the interacting connections of different locations in the forest. In other words, to go from one place to another, we had to go through a certain area, and they would block it, and that was very serious. The partisans began to plan missions to destroy by attacking this kind of outpost from the German army. Significantly enough, the Germans were usually on the main roads in the forest. They never went by the smaller roads, the byways. These roads were usually traversed by the local militias who were collaborating and working together, and sometimes worse than the Germans were in pursuing the partisans and killing us. So that was the life in this time of the year. Also, some people kept on dying, and we were wondering how long this would go on. We actually lived day to day. In the winter, we also discovered that we sometimes found a special berry, cranberries. Cranberries grow in swampy areas, and they were actually surviving the frost of the winter. Excuse me. And so I personally developed a system of going out and collecting the berries. The idea was for me to lie low and raise my hand up and pick the berries in a little bucket and bring it back to the camp to eat. In the process of doing it, you'd freeze your hands because the bushes, the shrubbery were full of snow or ice. And then that's how we continued from one day to another. I would like to say to you goodbye now and tell you I look forward to being with you next week. Remember, we're calling upon all those who listen to me, all of you, to join up in one way or another and let us be united against anti-Semitism. This is a very important issue, an issue which plagues the Jewish people throughout history, and we appeal to people of goodwill and kind and open hearts to join us in the fight against anti-Semitism. I wish you all the best, good health, remain well, and stalwart. God be with you till next time. Bye.